Welcome, gentle traveler. Tonight, we drift back, not in haste, but in hush, through winding cobbled streets and under slate-tiled rooftops, into a world lit by candlelight and warmed by the scent of bread rising in ancient ovens. This is not a story of knights or kings, not one of grand battles or courtly drama. Instead, it is a quieter history, one woven from flour and fire, labor and rhythm. It is the story of a humble craft, of a baker in a medieval village whose day begins when the stars still glimmer and ends as the bells of vespers echo down stone alleyways. Before the town stirs, before even the roosters crow, the baker is already awake. In the silence of pre-dawn, they tend their flame, knead the dough, and mark the passage of time not with clocks, but with instinct. Theirs is a world of patience, of hands dusted in flour, of dough gently rising beneath linen cloth. As we follow their footsteps, we won't rush. This is not a tale to race through. Let it unfold like warm steam from a crusty loaf, rising and vanishing into the morning air. Let the rhythm of this simple life lull you into peace. So wherever you are, whether you've nestled into bed or curled into a quiet corner with a soft blanket, dim your lights, let your shoulders drop, and take a deep breath. The fire is already lit. The flour has been milled. The wooden door creaks open. Come with me now into the quiet heart of a medieval bakehouse. Let the day begin. In the hushed stillness that precedes the dawn, the medieval village lies wrapped in slumber. The cobbled paths are silent. The hearths within each timber-framed home no longer glow, but smolder faintly with the last traces of yesterday's warmth. Dew settles quietly on the thatched roofs, and the gentle rustle of stands as the only herald of the coming day. This is the hour where time feels suspended, a delicate balance between night and morning. Even the animals are still. The hens remain perched in their coop, their soft feathers puffed in sleep. A stray cat curls in a warm corner of a hayloft. The world is not yet stirring, and the silence is complete. Not empty, but full, like the pause between breaths. Within the modest stone home of the village baker, a subtle movement breaks the tranquility. A soft creak of the wooden cot, the shifting of woolen blankets. The baker awakens not to an alarm, but to a body trained by repetition and rhythm. He rubs his eyes and swings his legs over the edge of the bed. There is no hurry in his movements. He sits still for a moment longer, letting his thoughts settle like flour drifting through a sieve. The dim room is familiar, beloved, its quiet corners and earthen walls lined with shadows that know his every motion. He reaches for a carved wooden cup beside the bed, sips a bit of cool water, and stretches his arms, long and slow. The hearth at the far end of the room is asleep as well, its embers breathing in slow red pulses. The baker crouches beside it, gathering twigs and kindling from a basket tucked neatly nearby. He builds the fire not with haste, but with attention. There is an art to kindling warmth, just as there is in coaxing rise from dough. He leans in and exhales gently onto the coals. A faint glow answers him. He adds a bit more kindling, watches the flame take hold, then feeds it slowly, respectfully. This fire is not merely heat, it is heart. It will warm the dough, harden the crust, and fill the home with life. As the room brightens with flickering gold, the baker lights a tallow candle from the flame. Its small glow joins the fire, casting long shadows that waver like silent prayers. He moves about the room, his footfalls muffled on the old wooden floor, careful not to disturb the quiet that still blankets the world. He dresses with care, first a thick woolen tunic, then a well-worn apron dusted faintly in flour. Around his head, he ties a kerchief, soft and faded. His shoes, softened by years of use, slide on without sound. There is a rhythm to it all, a ceremony shaped by the countless mornings that have come before. Outside, the sky holds a pale whisper of light. The stars grow faint, their watch complete. A thin line of silver blue rests on the horizon, promising warmth not yet felt. The baker opens the wooden shutters of his window and lets the cool air roll in. It smells of earth, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of damp leaves. At the small table near the window, he breaks off a piece of yesterday's loaf and pairs it with a bite of cheese. He eats slowly, mindfully. It is not a feast, but a moment of gratitude. He lifts a small wooden cup of ale, swirls it once, and drinks. The warmth settles in his chest. He moves to the corner where his tools and supplies await. Sacks of coarse ground flour, sealed tight against moisture, jars of sea salt and dried herbs, earthen crocks for proofing, and a lump of aged sourdough starter wrapped in cloth. Each item is checked and touched with a kind of reverence. Then he stops, resting a hand on the large wooden mixing bowl. His breath slows again. The dough will come soon enough. For now, the fire is the only thing that needs tending. He pulls up a stool, sits, and listens to the quiet crackle and snap of flame licking old wood. Sometimes he hums a tune, low and forgotten, one passed down from his father. Other times he speaks a few words aloud, little phrases meant for no one in particular. A greeting to the day, a memory of the last, or simply silence. The village remains asleep, chimneys unlit, doors unopened. But within this stone cottage, life is already turning. The room grows warmer. The air begins to carry the scent of smoke, wool, and the faintest memory of bread. This is a sacred hour for the baker, a time when the world feels gentle and far away. There is no clatter, no chatter, no pressing demand. Just the breath of flame, the weight of wood beneath hand, and the readiness of body and spirit. He wipes the table clean with a cloth and lays out his tools with precision. The wooden spoon, the clay jug of well water, the salt jar with its worn lid. Even the empty bowl feels full of promise, of patience, of possibility. And then, as though answering his quiet preparation, a rooster crows in the distance. One clear note carried on the cool air, stirring the village from its slumber. The day begins. With the hearth now warmed and casting its flickering glow across the room, the baker moves with quiet purpose. The preparation for the dough is a task he knows by heart. There is no need for measurement by scale or stopwatch. His fingers know the feel of the right proportion, his hands remember the weight, and his eyes have memorized the color and consistency. These instincts are honed through countless mornings just like this one, a sacred practice passed from baker to baker, parent to child, often without words. He crosses the room and lifts a heavy sack of flour from the corner. The coarse linen fabric is rough against his palms, familiar as an old friend. He unties the top and folds the fabric open with care. A soft, earthy scent escapes, warm, nutty, and faintly sweet, like a field of grain basking in afternoon sun. He plunges his hand into the sack, letting the flour sift between his fingers. With a wooden scoop, he lifts the flour and gently pours it into his mixing bowl. A cloud of dust dances briefly in the air, catching the morning light like mist in the low hills. He repeats the motion several times, forming a soft mound, a mountain of promise. The surface settles in gentle peaks and valleys. Next, he reaches for a stone jar with a sealed lid. When he opens it, a familiar tang fills the air. This is his sourdough starter, alive, active, bubbling faintly like a sleeping breath. Its sharp aroma is balanced with a yeasty warmth, speaking of time and care and many batches before. He stirs it once with a small spoon, then lifts a ladleful and pours it into the flower's center. He moves to the water jug resting near the hearth. Its clay surface is cool to the touch, and the water within, drawn from the well the previous day, is clear and still. He pours slowly, a careful stream trickling into the dry ingredients. The water darkens the flour and creates small rivulets as it spreads. The dough has not yet formed, but the union has begun. Salt comes next, a precious pinch, just enough to draw out the flavor and temper the sourness of the starter. He takes the salt from a small wooden box, its interior lined with cloth to keep the crystals dry. It falls over the flour like a light snowfall, brief and significant. Now the mixing begins. He rolls up his sleeves and places both hands into the bowl. The first touch is always the same, dry and resistant. The flour clings to his fingers, stubborn and gritty. But as he begins to stir, to fold, to coax, it changes. Water and starter soak into the flour. The mass becomes sticky, almost reluctant, yet it responds. His movements are slow and steady. There is no rush, only rhythm. The bowl turns beneath his hands as he folds the mixture from the edges into the center, again and again. A soft, wet sound accompanies each motion, like footsteps in wet grass. With time, the ingredients yield and bond, forming a ragged dough. When the dough is cohesive enough, he lifts it from the bowl and places it onto the floured work table. It rests there, a heavy, shaggy lump waiting to be transformed. He dusts his hands, then begins to knead. Kneading is his favorite part. He presses forward with the heel of his palm, folds the dough over, turns it slightly, and begins again. It is a rhythm, a dance. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. The dough pushes back, warm and dense. It begins to soften, to stretch, to breathe beneath his hands. The table creaks faintly under the repeated motion. The air is filled with the scent of yeast and flour, firewood and morning. His muscles move with memory, each repetition as familiar as breath. The dough becomes smoother. Its texture tightens. Blisters of air begin to form beneath the surface. He does not look at the clock. There is none. He does not count. He feels. When the dough pushes back with just the right elasticity, when it springs beneath his fingertips and holds its shape, he knows it is ready. He shapes it into a rounded ball and returns it gently to the bowl. He wets a piece of linen cloth, wrings it out, and lays it over the bowl's rim. The dough must rest now, must rise, slowly and unseen. He places the bowl near the hearth, where the warmth will encourage the yeast to work, quietly, patiently. And now, the waiting begins. But waiting is not idle. The baker moves through the room with purpose. He brushes flour from the table and sweeps stray dust from the floor. He folds the cloth that held the salt and tucks it away. He stirs the fire and adds a new log, listening to the pop and hiss as the flames accept the offering. He pours himself a second sip of ale, darker, richer, and sits once more on his stool by the fire. The seat is worn to the shape of his body. He leans back slightly, one hand on his knee, the other cradling the cup. His breath slows. The dough, now covered, begins its quiet transformation. Within, the wild yeast feeds, breathes, and multiplies. Tiny bubbles form, stretching the gluten, softening the interior, and lightening the weight. The dough, like the morning, rises with silent purpose. Outside, the sky shifts once more. The lavender blush of early dawn melts into a soft gold. Light filters through the window, touching the bowl, the table, and the tired but content face of the baker. The world begins to wake, and so does the bread. The dough rests beneath a linen cloth, a quiet and unassuming shape in the large wooden bowl. It appears still, but it is not idle. Within, the alchemy of bread making has already begun. Microscopic life, yeasts, and lactobacilli from the starter are consuming the sugars in the flour. Carbon dioxide is produced and captured by the glutinous web formed through kneading. Bubbles form. The dough stretches and lifts, almost imperceptibly at first. The baker knows this process well. He does not need to peer under the cloth constantly or fret about time. The warmth of the nearby hearth, the consistency of the starter, and the feel of the dough all guide him. Still, he moves with gentle efficiency as he prepares for the time ahead. This first rise, or bulk fermentation, is the soul of the bread. It is when the foundation of its texture and flavor takes shape. The baker understands this, and so he gives the dough the time it needs, not rushing it nor disturbing it unnecessarily. Bread does not bend to the will of man. It grows in its own time. As the dough begins to rise, the baker tends to his space. He brushes flour dust from the corners of his table with slow sweeps of a straw broom. He opens the small wooden shutter to let in a sliver of the morning light. The pale gold of sunrise spills in, catching the motes of flour suspended in the air like glowing flecks of dust. There is peace in this moment, in the ordinary. Outside, the village is just beginning to stir. A distant clink of a bucket at the well, a murmur of voices from a nearby cottage, chickens clucking softly as they emerge from their coops. The world awakens in layers, just as the dough rises in silent increments. The baker steps outside for a moment, breathing in the crisp morning air. His cottage stands on the edge of the village, where fields begin to stretch outward, barley, rye, and wheat, their golden stalks now harvested. A few villagers pass, nodding their sleepy greetings. He returns the gesture with a soft smile. Back inside, he checks the dough with practiced delicacy. He does not uncover it, but rather presses 2 fingers lightly into the side. The indentation lingers, then slowly, gently begins to spring back. Not fully, just enough. It is a sign the dough is waking up, becoming alive. To keep the process even, he turns the bowl slightly, rotating it so the warmth of the hearth spreads more uniformly. Occasionally, he performs a stretch and fold, reaching into the bowl with wet hands to gently lift the dough and fold it over itself. This process strengthens the gluten, aligns the strands, and redistributes the gases that are beginning to form. Each fold is slow and intentional. He lifts one edge of the dough, allows it to stretch with gravity, and then folds it gently toward the center. He turns the bowl a quarter turn and repeats. The dough sighs softly with each motion. Then, once more, the cloth is laid over the top, and the dough continues its gentle expansion. The baker takes this lull to sharpen his tools, a small curved knife, the lame, used for scoring loaves, a wooden paddle for retrieving bread from the oven, a curved blade for trimming wayward bits of burnt crust. Each tool is cleaned, oiled, and laid neatly in its place. The morning progresses. Birds chirp outside the window now. A boy calls for a dog. Somewhere, a door creaks open, and the smell of smoke joins the breeze. These are the sounds of daily life, and they blend seamlessly with the quiet inside the baker's cottage. After about an hour, the dough has doubled in size. The cloth now rises like a gentle dome over the bowl. The baker removes it slowly, revealing the soft, swollen mass beneath. He inhales the aroma, a delicate tang, slightly sweet, with the earthy scent of flour and fermentation. He dusts his hands lightly with flour and presses 2 fingers into the top. The dough sighs again, the indentations slowly returning. It is ready. Before shaping, he lets the dough rest. Bench rest, he calls it. He gently turns it onto the floured table, careful not to deflate it too much. The dough wobbles slightly, still full of air. He covers it with the linen cloth again and leaves it to relax. This short pause will make shaping easier, allowing the gluten to settle. During this time, he prepares the baking surfaces. He sprinkles flour onto wooden proofing boards and lines woven baskets with cloth. These will cradle the shaped loaves in the next stage of rising. A few sprigs of dried rosemary hang from a hook above the table, and he considers adding some to a portion of the dough, a small variation for those who favor fragrant bread. He works without rush. His hands, rough and strong, move with precision and familiarity. He knows that every loaf is unique, shaped not just by ingredients and hands, but by the weather, the mood of the dough, even the stillness of the morning. In this chapter of the process, nothing dramatic occurs. There is no fire, no grand transformations. But within the bowl and beneath the cloth, life stirs. Time moves quietly, and the promise of bread becomes ever more real. The baker sips again from his ale and sits once more near the hearth, arms folded across his chest. Outside, the morning has fully arrived. The first bell tolls at the village chapel, calling a few faithful to prayer. A cart rumbles by on the road, pulled by a sleepy-eyed mule. The baker listens. Then, rising from his stool, he uncovers the dough for the final time. It has rested. It has grown. It is ready to become bread. The dough, now soft and airy from its first rise, rests in the center of the floured table. The baker approaches with reverence, as one might approach a living creature. In a way, it is just that, alive, responsive, dynamic. He peels back the linen cloth with deliberate care and sets it aside, revealing the full domed surface beneath, dotted with tiny gas bubbles like the surface of a sleeping pond, disturbed only by the breath of morning wind. He stands quietly for a moment, simply observing. The dough has changed since he first mixed it. It has swelled with life, its texture transformed from sticky to supple, from rough to refined. He lets his eyes trace its contours, reading the signs written in the tension of its surface and the scattered pattern of bubbles. Every rise is slightly different, and each one speaks in its own subtle language. Outside the window, the village has fully awakened. A cart rumbles in the distance. A child laughs. The bell from the chapel tower rings softly across the morning air. But inside the bakery, the world is still calm, measured in breath, motion, and flour. He dusts his hands lightly and slides a metal dough scraper beneath the edge of the dough. It releases without resistance, stretching slightly before gathering into itself. With gentle control, he transfers it from the bowl to the table. It slumps slightly, elastic and alive, holding the memory of its fermentation. There is no haste. The baker allows the dough to rest and spread slightly before beginning the next step. He dusts the top with flour and studies it a moment longer. Then, with practiced precision, he cuts it into 4 even sections. The scraper slices cleanly through the dough, revealing its honeycombed interior, a tapestry of air and strength. Each portion is shaped roughly into a ball. This is the pre-shape. He folds the edges of the dough inward, creating tension on the surface. Then he covers them with a cloth and lets them rest. 10 minutes to relax the gluten. This rest is as essential as the shaping itself. It allows the dough to be molded more easily and more beautifully. While the rounds relax, the baker prepares his proofing baskets. Some are round, some oblong, each lined with linen cloths that he flours or dusts with coarse bran. These will hold the loaves during their final rise, supporting their shape while allowing the air to flow around them. The baker returns to the dough. The first round is ready. He presses it gently into a flattened oval, careful not to deflate it too much. The larger air pockets are nudged out, but the rest is preserved. He folds one edge inward, then the other over it, pressing gently to seal. He turns it and rolls it again, tightening the seam beneath. The second piece he shapes differently, into a boule. He tucks the edges beneath, turning the dough in his palms until the surface becomes tight and smooth. The loaf rests in his hands like a warm stone, heavy and pliant. He lowers it gently into a basket, seam side up, and repeats the process with the remaining pieces. As he works, he hums a slow, quiet melody, perhaps an old song, perhaps one made up just for this morning. His movements are graceful, even poetic. The shaping of the dough is more than technique. It is conversation. The dough speaks through its stretch and resistance, and the baker answers with touch and care. Each loaf, now shaped and tucked into its basket, is covered once more and left to proof. This final rise is delicate. Too short, and the crumb will be tight. Too long, and the dough may collapse. But the baker has learned to trust his senses. He knows the feel, the smell, and the look of readiness. He checks the fire, adding larger logs of hardwood, each one carefully chosen and aged for just this purpose. The flames leap and curl, then settle into a strong, steady burn. The stones within the oven walls absorb the heat, storing it for the baking ahead. While the oven heats, he prepares the wooden peels, long-handled paddles used to place the loaves into the oven. He sprinkles them with flour and sets them in a row near the hearth. Beside them rests a small curved blade, his lame, used to score the tops of the loaves before baking. An hour passes. The loaves have risen beautifully. Their surfaces are smooth, taut, and slightly domed. He lifts the cloth from one basket and presses a finger gently into the dough. It yields slowly, leaving a soft impression that does not spring back. It is time. One by one, he turns the loaves out onto the peels. The air fills with the soft thud of dough meeting wood. A hush settles over the room as he lifts the blade. Each loaf receives a different mark, a slash down the center, a cross, or a series of leaves. These are not mere decorations, but necessary vents for steam and expansion. Yet they are also signatures, silent stories etched in flour and blade. The oven is ready. He opens the iron door, and a wave of heat brushes his face. The glow inside is golden, almost holy. He slides the first loaf in, then the next. The loaves disappear into the fire's embrace, their surfaces beginning to bloom. He steps back, exhales softly, and closes the door. The shaping is finished. The baking has begun. The heat of the oven is now steady, radiating from its thick stone walls like the stored breath of the morning fire. The flames have quieted, leaving a bed of glowing embers tucked in the back. The baker, standing before the hearth with his pile of dough-laden loaves, is serene. Each movement he makes is unhurried, steeped in tradition. He peers into the oven, gauging the temperature with his senses, the warmth on his face, the shimmer in the air, and the hue of the stone. There are no thermometers, no dials, only experience, only intuition. He draws a bit of flour on a flat stone and places it inside. It darkens slowly, not too quickly, just right. The oven is ready. He moves to his first loaf, already scored, already speaking with its quiet readiness. With a slight twist of his wrists, he slides the peel forward and then, with a quick jerk, lets the loaf glide into place on the hot oven floor. A whisper of steam escapes as dough meets heat. One by one, he introduces each loaf to the oven. They sit beside one another, equidistant, surrounded by the thick stone walls that will bake them with consistent, enveloping heat. The oven door is sealed with a heavy wooden slab, latched into place. And then, the wait begins. Baking is not a time of idleness, but of attentiveness. The baker remains close. He watches the tiny vent hole in the top of the oven, noting the subtle trails of steam. He listens for the faint crackling sound, tiny bursts of crust forming, of dough expanding. Inside, each loaf responds to the heat in its own way. First, there is the spring, the sudden lift of dough as the yeast's final exhalation gives life to the loaves. The crust begins to form, sealing in moisture and building structure. Caramelization begins, sugars darkening to gold, then brown. The smell is irresistible, deep and rich, and full of warmth and history. The baker prepares a brush made of bundled twigs and soaks it in water. After about 20 minutes, he opens the oven briefly and uses the brush to sweep the floor between loaves. A light mist rises, steam that will help the crust develop its sheen and strength. Then the door is closed again, sealing the heat. During this time, he sets about readying his cooling racks, simple wooden slats laid over crates, and cleans the peel with long, slow strokes. The tools are always kept in good condition, for they are extensions of the baker's hands, his practice, his presence. More time passes. The village outside is now bustling. Children's voices carry on the breeze. The distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer punctuates the air. A cow moos plaintively, but within the bakery, the stillness remains. Finally, the baker opens the oven. The loaves greet him with dark golden crusts, cracked and crisped in the places where steam once pushed against scoring marks. The room fills with the fragrance of toasted grain and deep, sweet fermentation. He reaches in with the peel and lifts the first loaf, its weight solid, its bottom firm and dry. He taps the underside gently with his knuckles. It echoes, a hollow, drum-like note. Done. Each loaf is removed and placed on the cooling racks. The baker does not rush this part either. He lays them out carefully, leaving space between them so that the steam can escape without softening the crust. The loaves sit, the heat within slowly easing into the air. The baker watches the crusts crackle, a series of small, crisp pops like the slow ticking of a cooling forge. The sound is subtle, but to him, it sings. He stands before the completed batch and bows his head briefly. Not out of ritual, but out of recognition. This is the culmination of hours of quiet labor, of rising before dawn, of fire and flour, of waiting and watching. He slices into the first loaf. The crust resists, crackles, then gives way to a tender interior. The crumb is open but not overly airy, soft but structured, flecked with darker bits from the whole grain. The aroma is sweet and sour and warm. He tastes it. A smile forms. He will set these loaves aside to cool fully before delivering them to the village. Some will be taken to the inn, others to the chapel, a few to the elderly widow down the lane who can no longer walk to market. And several will be sold directly from his window, exchanged for coin or for other essentials. The baking is complete, but the day is far from over. He begins to sweep the flour from the floor, the ashes from the hearth, preparing his workspace for tomorrow. There will always be more dough, more shaping, more fire. But for now, he breathes in the scent of bread and smiles at the gentle rhythm of the work. The bread has risen. The hearth is quiet. The morning has grown full, and the golden light of day stretches comfortably across the village. Shadows are no longer long and uncertain, but have softened into familiar companions. Edges rounded, lines blurred. The warmth of the sun settles gently on the cobbled streets, breathing life into shutters and doorways as the stillness of dawn yields to the gentle stir of routine. Chimneys now puff contentedly, their thin ribbons of smoke winding upward into the blue. Doors creak open with a kind of ceremony, revealing sleepy faces and quiet hands beginning the day's labors. The soft shuffle of footsteps, the clatter of pails, the sweep of brooms against stone, all become part of the village's morning symphony. Standing at the threshold of his stone cottage, the baker inhales deeply. The air carries the mingled scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and sun-warmed stone. But above all, it carries the perfume of bread, freshly baked, golden crusted, and faintly sweet. It is a fragrance that speaks not just of nourishment, but of comfort, memory, and place. He steps into the light and lifts the shutters of his small bakery window, securing them with loops of weathered leather. Beneath the sill, he pulls out a simple wooden shelf, his makeshift counter. He spreads a clean cloth across its surface and begins laying out the morning's offering. There are round boules with blistered crusts, long batards scored with rustic patterns, and flatter loaves, seasoned with rosemary, thyme, and sea salt. Each one is a story told in flour, fire, and time. Each one hums with warmth. Soon the first customer appears, a stooped elderly man with a wicker basket and a walking stick. His cane taps a quiet rhythm on the stones as he approaches. He and the baker exchange a silent nod of greeting, and without a word, the baker breaks off a piece of warm bread and offers it to him. The old man accepts it with a murmur of gratitude, chews slowly, eyes half closed. After a moment, he points to a crusty round. The baker wraps it in cloth, slips it into the basket, and accepts 2 copper coins in return. "May it keep you well," he says softly, as he always does. The flow continues. A young mother arrives with her toddler in tow. A shepherd offers goat's cheese in exchange for 3 batards. A pair of sisters, faces smudged with flour from their own kitchens, come for the salted rounds. Each interaction is brief, familiar, and unhurried. Children appear barefoot and wide-eyed, clutching coins, or sometimes nothing at all. One girl arrives with a string of sky blue beads threaded on twine. She holds it out solemnly. "For my grandmother's supper," she explains. The baker examines the beads, nods, and hands her a still warm roll. "And this one," he adds, tucking a second into her palm, "is for your walk home." From the nearby inn, the keeper arrives, a stout woman in a flour-dusted apron. She inspects the day's order with a discerning eye. 8 loaves set aside, evenly browned, cooled to perfection. "You've outdone yourself," she says with a wink, as if complimenting a favorite stew. "Payment will come later, perhaps in stew, perhaps in beer, perhaps in nothing more than loyal exchange." The blacksmith's apprentice, soot-streaked and smiling, passes by on his way to the forge and raises a hand. The baker nods and sets aside a loaf by habit. It's already understood. Bread for mended tools, a quiet barter written into the rhythm of the week. Not every payment is made with coin. Some come with eggs, some with bundles of firewood wrapped in twine. Others arrive with small jars of honey, sprigs of lavender, or berries gathered from the woods. The market here is not driven by currency alone, but by reciprocity, by neighborliness, by need. At mid-morning, the chapel bell rings. Its tone carries through the alleys and fields, low and resonant. The baker pauses, listening. It is not just a signal of time, but a tether to something larger: community, rhythm, peace. A group of children runs past, their laughter bouncing off the stones. One boy stops suddenly, peers over the counter and points to a small roll misshapen in baking. "May I?" he asks, hopeful. The baker picks it up and places it in the boy's outstretched hands. "That one was waiting for you," he says with a chuckle. By now, the counter is nearly empty. Only a few loaves remain, carefully wrapped in cloth and marked for later delivery. One for the widowed seamstress, one for the healer near the woods, and one for the traveling merchant who comes every other week with stories and salt. The baker takes a step back from the counter and leans against the doorway, arms folded across his chest. The sun now rests on the stones at his feet, warm and solid. His hands, floured, rough and lined, hang quietly at his sides. He breathes in again, not from fatigue, but from presence. Across the lane, the smith's hammer strikes steel. A sheep calls out from the pasture. Somewhere down the road, a cartwheel creaks. The world continues in gentle motion, and the baker stands at its heart, part of it, shaped by it, shaping it in return. The village has awakened. And in the quiet harmony of need and giving, of labor and grace, the baker's work continues to nourish not only the body, but the soul. The sun arcs low over the horizon now, its golden blaze softening into amber, then rose, then a gentle indigo that brushes the rooftops and fields of the village. The busy hum of the day has tapered off into a lulling quietude. Doors are latched, animals penned, fires lit once again, not for baking, but for warmth and supper. The village begins to fold into itself like a great patchwork blanket. The baker, whose day began long before the first bird stirred, is at the end of his own rhythm. His sleeves are rolled to his elbows, revealing the creases and flour-dusted skin of hands that have shaped nourishment from the simplest of means. These hands now rest on the edge of the wooden table, no longer kneading, but instead wiping down surfaces with slow, deliberate strokes. The interior of the cottage glows in the amber light of the setting sun, which filters through the warped glass panes in streaks and blurs. Shadows stretch long across the floor and the remnants of the day. A few flower patches, a used peel resting against the wall, crumbs brushed into a small pile, serve as a quiet testament to the labor now behind him. He hums under his breath, a low, steady sound with no particular tune. Perhaps a melody his mother once sang, or a fragment from the chapel choir. It is comforting, familiar. His voice merges with the gentle clinking of pottery as he sets aside the last of the utensils, stacks the proofing baskets, and pushes the table slightly closer to the wall. With his work complete, he pours himself a small measure of cider, mellow, cloudy, stored in a cool earthen jug. He drinks slowly, savoring the tart, sweet flavor that tickles the edge of tiredness in his throat. Then he sets the cup down, turns the loaf he saved for himself onto a board, and slices off a thick piece. It is still faintly warm, and he smears it with a bit of soft cheese wrapped in waxed cloth earlier that week. A modest supper, but satisfying. He carries the food to the small bench by the window and sits. The silence of the cottage is deep, yet never empty. It is filled with the soft crackle of firewood, the occasional whistle of wind squeezing through the beams, and the muted chorus of evening birds calling to one another as they settle into hedges and eaves. From his vantage point, he can see the village green. A few figures remain outside, an old woman walking slowly with a shawl pulled tight, a pair of children chasing one another in the fading light, a farmer herding the last of his goats into their enclosure. Beyond them, the chapel bell tower stands in silhouette against the colored sky, peaceful and unmoving. He eats slowly, chewing deliberately, each bite a small meditation. The crust is crisp and fragrant, the crumbs soft and yielding. The cheese melts slightly from the residual warmth, and the cider cuts cleanly through the richness. There is no rush to finish. The body is tired but not worn, the mind quiet but not empty. As twilight deepens, he sets his empty cup on the windowsill and steps outside. The air is cool and still, holding that particular scent of evening, damp earth, smoke, and the fading perfume of herbs growing in the garden plot beside the door. Lavender, thyme, a touch of chamomile. He walks slowly around the back of the house, checking the storage barrels and wooden crates beneath the eaves. There is enough flour left for tomorrow's bake, enough wood for the morning's fire. The sourdough starter has been refreshed and covered, resting on the hearth in its stoneware crock. He sits again on the doorstep, hands folded in his lap, and lets his gaze lift toward the darkening sky. The first stars appear, small, sharp, distant. One by one they come, each a quiet punctuation in the vastness above. He breathes in deeply and exhales slowly. This day, like the dough he worked so patiently, has risen and come to rest. He reflects not with grandeur, but with a quiet, grounded gratitude. There were no miracles today, no great events, but there was bread. There was a fire. There were neighbors fed and children smiling. There was rhythm and stillness, labor and peace. He recalls the smile of the young girl with the glass beads, the gruff thanks from the innkeeper, the light in the eyes of the boy given the misshapen roll. These are the true riches of the baker's life. In the cottage behind him, the fire in the hearth flickers lower. The coals dim, glowing faintly in the soot-darkened stone. He rises at last and returns indoors, securing the shutters and latching the door. He places a cloth over the final cooling loaf and carries the empty bowl and spoon to the basin. The candlelight glows steady now, soft and amber. The day is done. The baker undresses with slow hands, folding his tunic over a chair. He washes his face with cool water from the jug and dries it with a rough towel. His bed, simple, straw-filled and covered in wool, awaits in the corner. He crawls into it, drawing the blanket over his body. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rustling the trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. The stars glimmer through the window, their light barely touching the edge of the room. The baker closes his eyes and sleeps. And so, the embers fade. The village lies hushed beneath a silver sky, and the humble baker rests, wrapped in warmth and quiet dreams. His hands, dusted in flour and memory, have shaped more than bread. They've shaped a rhythm, a peace, a purpose. Tonight, as the moon casts its light across timbered walls, you too can let go of the weight of the day. Let your breath deepen. Let your thoughts slow. Like dough rising gently in silence. You've wandered through the stillness of a simpler time, where labor was sacred, kindness was currency, and each loaf told a quiet story. Now, may your dreams be light and nourishing, folded like dough with care, and baked in the calm fire of rest. Sleep well, dear traveler. Until we meet again, in another quiet tale, good night.